Hello, everyone. As was just said, I'm Ron Bakker. I'm a partner at PLP Architecture. I'm going to show you lots of pictures because pictures are our work. And there's a couple of films as well with loud music and flashing lights, so don't be scared. The project I'm going to talk about is now called The Edge. I've been working on it for a very long time. It survived as a project, a bad recession in the Netherlands, which is not quite over yet. And it gave us time to consider a bit more than is normally the case with speculative office buildings, what this building should be like. But watch this little film. Okay, PLP Architecture. We are a young firm, but we've been together as a group of people for 22, 23 years. We used to run the London office of Cohn Pedersen Fox, and you may have heard of us some 15 years ago when we did some projects in Prague. And a little bit of an indication, our work is very broad. We do a lot of residential, university buildings, we do tall buildings, we do small buildings, we do pretty much everything and anywhere people will have us. But we've always been very focused on Europe and Western Europe as a market, coming from an American tradition. My partners are Americans. We have been looking at sustainability as part of the design process for a long time now. A lot of architects will say that, and especially these days, but we completed this building in The Hague in 1997, and it was a project that extended existing provincial headquarters buildings, and there was a whole story about its orientation, the way it dealt with the noise from the motorway running around, how it dealt with the sun shining into the building and into the plaza. It had a cold and heat storage system in the groundwater. It used its public spaces to ventilate the project. It was 20, what's it at? That's, yeah, it's almost 20 years ago. And it was quoted at the time, and I've never been able to check, in some Japanese magazine that it was the world's most energy efficient office building. I don't think it's true, but it was nice to be heard. The building, I go there sometimes, still functions really well. It's a wonderful place. The Heron Tower is quite a famous building we did in London, which is a tall building, but it's the first tall building in London that uses the orientation carefully to preserve energy and to allow daylight into the building. It's actually the diagram that makes the building. So we'll see quite a lot of that. Unilever's headquarters, a building which was very dark. On the left, the before situation, a refurbishment of a building from the 1930s. Small light wells, quite a tall building, a very dark office space, which we kind of ripped out all the back and made one bright atrium in the middle of the building that provides daylight to all the workspace. And this one you might recall, Danube House on the river, which was a building that's totally about orientation, with its north face on the river, where the sun does not shine and the trees cool the space. It's clean air, and a protective atrium to the south, protecting against the sunlight and the noise from the road going past. But actually, that diagram made the building. The atrium is part of the air circulation through the building. The cool air from the river bank is sucked by the thermal rise of the air in the atrium through a labyrinth of channels under the car park to be pre-cooled in summer and preheated in winter, all free. We haven't spent a penny on electricity yet, and the office space is already partly ventilated. I think it's a wonderful building as well for the city, and I love the space from the inside. It's a place where people gather, and from what I hear, people love to work there. So this is also quite some time ago, but when we started looking at the project in Amsterdam, Deloitte was a tenant to the building at the time, and they put out a question to the market: who's going to develop our headquarters in Amsterdam? They have about 40 office buildings in the Netherlands. And they wanted to consolidate 3 or 4 in the Amsterdam region into one building. OVG Real Estate, a young and dynamic and ambitious small operation at the time, won the competition with my help, I must say, to provide this building for Deloitte. And it's placed in the CBD, the business district of Amsterdam, which has been growing for the last 20 years. It's about 5 minutes on the train from Schiphol Airport. It is 10 minutes on the underground to the city center. It's possibly the best connected business district in Europe. The fast train will stop right there at the station that would be the Amsterdam station when it finally arrives from Paris and takes you through to Hamburg. The location could not be better. Deloitte had recently completed some projects. Their headquarters in Rotterdam is a tower on the river, wonderful building, great views, but people don't feel they're part of the building. They told me recently, I work in the Amsterdam office and in the Rotterdam office, and I really miss the idea that you have one big space in the building, which is the whole idea of their project in Amsterdam. Similarly, in The Hague, a very well accessed location, but a standard office building. You get into the lift, you go to your floor, the 7th floor, you walk to the left, there's your office, and you say hi to the people you know, but you know only about 12 people. So the idea in Amsterdam was to create an atrium. This was the competition design, already some 7 years old. And it had an atrium which had the circulation in. It also had a little mast calling for attention. It's possibly one of Amsterdam's best locations at the moment. Very visible. But what Deloitte really felt like creating, and that was our first discussion actually during the competition, was to make a place where people who worked in the building felt they were part of it. And they could talk to people that they didn't necessarily know, even people from other companies. They really wanted to create a community, and they wanted to share knowledge. We'll be talking about that a little bit more. There was no word about sustainability at the time. The Netherlands had quite strict building regulations for the use of energy and for the use of materials when we started a project in 2007, 2008. But there was no accreditation system like we have now. The building sits along the motorway. It has a north-facing atrium. It's lucky actually in its location, because on the south side it will eventually be part of a new block structure of buildings which the city is developing in the area. Some of these buildings are existing, most of them are not. On the north side there is a 150-meter wide infrastructure bundle with trains, underground trams, the motorway, and it's actually a dike. And if you've ever been to the Netherlands, or even if you haven't, you know that most of it's underwater. And if it wasn't for the dikes, we'd all be better swimmers than we already are. And The idea of a dike is that, you know, you pump the water to a higher level and you keep pumping it over the dikes until you can ditch it into the sea. And it's what the Dutch have been doing for 800 years. And people say sometimes that's why they are so good at getting together, put their heads together, make a decision over something that needs to happen in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they do it. And it's because they've been protecting against the sea. Now, one of the typical Dutch buildings that came out of this dike phenomenon is called the Dike House, would you believe it? And it's it's built into the dike. The family lives on top of the dike. The road is always on the top of the dike, because otherwise you have to go under, you have to go over. It's better to stay on top of the dike. So the family enters the house, and the kitchen and the living room is on the top of the dike, whereas on the bottom right, the stables and the farming equipment is where the farmland is. Very nice. You always look over the dike, and the building, this is a section through it, has the same aspect. So it has the public space in the atrium climbing up to a level that gives you a view over the dike. One of the principles of this, of the design of this project. But really, the orientation of the building has to do with the fact Deloitte wanted to be on the motorway, show people where they were. They wanted people to look into the building, as well as people looking out of the building to the great view. So the orientation then, this is really the most important picture of this whole presentation, because energy in modern office buildings is about the battle between sunlight and daylight, okay? Daylight's good, sunlight's nice, but not so good. It warms up your building. You have to cool the hell out of it for 6 months a year if you let the sun shine in, but you do need the daylight. So there is some noise and pollution on the north that made the atrium a good idea as a buffer. The daylight is free on the north because you don't have to filter the sun away, so you want to let it in as much as you can. During the day you have to shade in the east, south and west facades, so you don't let too much solar gain in. The southern sun is the hottest and the most energetic, so you should open the building to the north, and you should close it somewhat more to the south. You can provide more structure there to have thermal mass to soak up the energy in the morning when the building is nice and cool. The first couple of hours you don't need to worry about cooling because the concrete will soak it up. You have to provide shading but allow the daylight in, so don't close the top of the window, close the bottom. And you can provide photovoltaics on the south facade where the energy is high. So to prove that, and we worked parametrically a little bit. That's a whole different story, but it's nice to be able to use the technology we have these days to work out what is actually really good. And Chris talked a little bit about metrics. I don't know very many numbers, but the theory is all there. So what we did is compare the amount of daylight coming into different floor plates. And if you take our 2,500 square meter floor plate on the left and you don't have an atrium, that wouldn't be allowed in Holland. Everyone has the right to sit by a window. If you open it up and make an atrium, you can see the dark blue is disappearing already. That's the darkest space. And if you open the shape of the atrium a bit more, you get a lot more daylight in from the north. And in the last picture, we shaved off a pyramidical piece of the massing of the building to allow even more daylight in. And we've now found ourselves with a situation where we only really have dark purple where we have cores in the building. So the floor plate design is based entirely on daylighting. Apart from other things, there's functionalities. We have 2 cores in the atrium. The building can be divided into 3 tenancies per floor if necessary. And the engineers told us exactly how much glass we were allowed to have in the different orientations of the building. So in the north, as much as possible. The 70% actually is full height glass. The spandrels where the floor is closed, but the rest is all open. And when we go around the building, the facade changes according to the orientation, so that in the atrium we have totally clear glass. It's double glazed to preserve some heat, but it is allowing every bit of daylight in. On the north-facing facades and the atrium facades, we have 100% glass, and then we start to close it off with quite deep elements that provide some shading when the sun is at an obtuse angle. And on the south, where we have that powerful sunlight at, we think at noon, but in fact it's for quite a long time during the day. We collect solar energy on the solid panels. So these panels come in all sorts of colors, as long as it's blue. And we kept our fingers crossed that it was going to look beautiful, and we were lucky there. That's the only material we didn't really pick ourselves. The roof is covered with photovoltaic cells, and this little film shows you what the sun does to the building at different times. So the sun goes up at, this is around about this time of the year, and you can see at about 8:30, the sun is already shining on the southern facade. So you think it's a noon sun, but in fact the solar panels are already collecting the energy. And there's an optimum angle for the roof. The roof level is pitched by about 7 degrees to maximize in Holland the solar exposure of the PV panels. Solar noon, because of the daylight saving hours, is a little bit later than noontime, but this is what the sun sees when it's most efficient, so it's almost all PV cells. And then the working day is almost over, and the sun is still shining on the south facade. Every time it does, we collect energy. Not enough, because to become truly carbon neutral, we had to rent roofs of other buildings to put solar panels on, which we did. And we totaled 4,200 square meters, I think, of solar panels. Now, this is all very fast because there's a lot to say. The building uses the aquifer at 130 meters deep to keep the summer heat, basically, and use it in the winter, and to keep the coolth of the winter and use it in the summer, balancing over the seasons the water temperature that's used for all of the heating and cooling in the building. So all you need to do is pump it up. And the structure of the building, and this is an important sustainability issue. We talk about energy a lot, but in fact, you have to make these buildings as flexible as you can, and the elements that are going to last our lifetime should really be used for other things too. So we don't probably need office buildings as much as we do now in about 50 years' time, but the structure of the building can be used as an academic floor plate or even as residential, and we had to prove that to the city of Amsterdam. So it's prefabricated construction. Every piece of concrete in the building besides the basement is prefabricated, lifted onto site by about 3 guys working on site. It's unbelievable. They put the whole building up like a house of cards. And it's all very efficiently constructed. Deloitte is the main tenant of the building. They take about 7 floors out of 13. In the project. They have become increasingly involved in the quality aspects of the building as the building was being developed and designed. And they've become a real partner in attaining these incredible sustainability levels that the building eventually got. And the reason for that is that both OVG, the client OVG, is mad about sustainability. They saw the advantages commercially of doing this. At a very early stage, they made a promise to Bill Clinton. They spoke to Al Gore, and you don't really need the Americans to tell you that the world is going into the wrong direction, but they do go around and talk to people. And they pledged to invest heavily in sustainability. Now, the building eventually got a BREEAM rating of 98.34%. I haven't quite worked out whether we could have actually get the 100%, but it means we have done everything physically possible. And there's lists of hundreds of things to do. And the last few points we got from the solar panels on the roofs of other buildings. But in the process, there are 21 innovation credits. It stops nowhere. The investment is quite big to do this. And the question that you're going to ask me if I don't tell you the answer now is how can you afford to do these things? Well, Deloitte, our accountants, they've worked out their investment comes back in 10 years' time. It's not a problem. The building was sold to Dike, a German open-ended fund, who came to see the building and heard about the sustainability credentials and said, this is a dream come true, how much? And they paid really handsomely for the project because people don't buy buildings that are not sustainable. Okay? This is a change that happened in the last 10 years, and it's an important one because it means we can now consider investing into these buildings. There's a bunch of other things happening, and Erik is going to talk about the sustainability, but for me, the most important aspect of this building is that the people love to come here to work. There are 2,000 people working for Deloitte. They have 1,000 workspaces. Okay, they don't have their own desk. Nobody has their own desk. They come in the morning, and I think there's a little film about the happy people coming in to work in the morning that I'm going to play quickly before my time runs out. So 11 o'clock, because then the lights go out, because otherwise you don't get that BREEAM credit for electricity use at night. Okay. So in this building, everything is totally connected. The fellow comes into from a meeting at 11 o'clock. The car park knows that it's his car. They read the number plate. The arm barrier goes up automatically. His smartphone tells him where his desk is. He has to choose. Do you want to sit with your work group? Do you want to sit with people you don't know? Do you want anybody to know that you're there? You can say no. And when you get to your workplace, the temperature will have adjusted to what you like. Each of the workspaces the temperature can be lowered or made higher by 2 degrees, so there's a range of 4 degrees. The lighting levels are set at 350 lux. If you want more, you can go up to 1,000. You can do this all through your smartphone. Everything is connected. The building knows everything about everybody. Now, this is a big issue because we can learn from this, and Erik will tell you about this a bit more. We can learn exactly how the building is used. For the first time, we can measure energy use every minute of the day. It's wonderful. Everything is connected. Each of the light fixtures has a little IP address. Okay, it's powered through the Ethernet, which means the light fixtures can talk back to the building. And every light fixture measures various things that Erik will talk to you about, and it collects vast amounts of data. So the huge interest of people like Microsoft, who've just bought Nest.com for $6 billion, not because it's so nice to be able to switch your temperature off at home when you're in the pub, but it collects data, and data are a valuable asset these days. In the new kind of functioning of life, this building is very, very interesting. Deloitte have caught on to that. They are organizing their staff, transition into the digital world. They're seeing how their company can evolve to go into the digital world, and this building is part of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to telling you something about the technology used in the building, which was a big contribution by a lot of firms, not only by Schneider Electric. Of course, I would be pleased if it was only Schneider Electric, but it wouldn't be fair to state that it was only our accomplishment. I think maybe the biggest innovation was that we came at a very early stage involved with OVG and with the specifier to design a setup of innovations and solutions to make it able to behave the building like it should be as designed by Ron Bakker and his team. And we had to design some special solutions around energy management and energy capturing systems to let it behave and contribute to the system as designed before. So I think that's something which is maybe forgot too much, that in the end it has to be done by people. And people work at different companies, and there is a lot of knowledge outside. And the real question is to bring those knowledge on the table and to merge it and to find better solutions together, because I feel a bit humbled to stand here while it were not only my ideas, it were ideas from great engineers from several companies, and we created the environment to let them share and to let them contribute and to come up with solutions we would help creating a difference. So it were quite open discussions around, for instance, budget, what Ron was mentioning. It was not a cheap building. And I have to say, 5-6 years before we would deliver, there was a room to discuss, to invest in systems who would contribute in the benefit of energy usage or in sustainability. So it was not only about the dirty deal of money, it was about sharing knowledge and creating an environment to also participate in better systems, and they could be financed within the systems. The big thing was data. It was the problem, sorry, not the problem, what we try to obtain, that's what all the data gathered out of the various systems should contribute in a better system, and systems could learn from each other. So what we tried to create was an interoperability between those systems, gathering data, and to make the data available for the various systems. So it would not be the data from the Edge or from Schneider Electric or from Philips or from whoever was involved. It should be data where we could take the benefit of to optimize our systems as we would design afterwards. So, and we really believe that if you look to smart grids, and smart grids are starting to enter more and more within inside the building, that the grids should be smart and should be connected to the IP where we will come on to further on. So, as mentioned by Ron already, of course, the power over Ethernet Lightning brought a big contribution on energy saving, which is truly there. And the most important thing was that it generated a platform, a backbone on IP, where we could leverage on with all connected systems. So we created a universal backbone built on IP to connect with lighting, the ventilation systems, the access control, etc., etc. What we did about the CO2, in meeting rooms, we measure the CO2 and we steer the amount of air inside the rooms based on temperature, number of people available in the room, and of course the temperature. Climate ceilings were used to climatize the air, and the air was, as was shown in the film of Ron, pushed out to the atrium, then going up to the air in the atrium, and reused there the energy to go back directly in the HAU units. So thermal storage was the biggest part of the energy consumption for heat and cold water, and district heating was used as a backup. The colleagues from Dike, I don't know where they were asking her what kind of chillers were they used. I have to be honest, I don't know. But because the majority of it was produced by the thermal storage, and I'm sure there is a chiller, but I don't know for sure which one it was, how energy it was. So sorry, I will let you know afterwards. Maybe it was yours. I can't tell you. Integrated technologies. Just to name a few, as Ron was describing, each floor has 3 sections, and each section has provided with its own electricity, its own heat water, its own chilled water, and it's all been measured on that level. So each floor has a lot of energy meters to to at least measure and create data to analyze afterwards and to tell something about the sustainability of the building and the behavior of the people within it. Because no one has fixed desks, they move around. And if you have the data about how many people resided on that floor that day, and you have the energy consumed in that floor, you can analyze that and start analyzing why floor 3 uses more energy than floor 4, and you can start taking actions to provide or create that it will operate exactly the same as projected. Interaction with apps, I will show you a bit further on. And what we did with our systems, and I'm proud that except for the lighting, all the equipment, we were able to participate and to deliver there, is of course we want to reduce energy, costs and wastes within it, and that starts or ends, which is why we want to call it, with measuring and with analyzing, because of course you can make very energy efficient lighting, but if you don't measure afterwards, how on earth you can know if it was really energy efficient? Or if you plan to stop burning the lights at 11 to get the BREEAM credit, but you don't analyze that it's really been done, there will not be a saving. So energy measurement and analyzing is a critical part to let it really behave as a very energy efficient system. Data is maybe the big next thing, as IT companies would say, and I think that something definitely is true for buildings. We used to use a lot of data from our customers to analyze their behavior and to use it for our businesses. But data becomes more and more a part also from our building technologies, our building management systems, to start also leveraging on it in the building itself. What I said, we basically created the total technical environment from plan to plug. So that means that right from the trafo, from the mid-voltage part until the very last plug, we designed an architect with bus bars, substations, meterings, power factor controls, power factor correction installations to create a very energy efficient and very trustworthy installation. Now, as Ron was mentioning already, a lot of solar panels are connected to the building and or the surrounding buildings. And of course, if you want to prove that you would earn that credit, you have to measure that it also in the end provides the amount of energy as you had projected before. So energy management, again, was a critical part in it. One of the things, I don't know if it's very common to use in Czech Republic, but the reuse of rainwater, as it is in the Mosaic Hotel, but also low water consumption of toilets. So we flush the toilets with a lot of less water than we are used to. And not in this building, but in our own building, we even use urinoirs. We doesn't use water to flush, so it's on water you can save a tremendous amount of water, and thereby also the energy needed to create clean water, because we flush toilets with clean water which you can drink, which is, if you think about it, it's quite a silly thing, because why use clean drinking water to use flush toilets? So the reuse of rainwater really makes sense, and it's very far from what I'm doing in a day-to-day job on automation, but I think this is also one of the things within sustainability and where BREEAM and LEED kind of credits really makes sense to use and to benefit for architects and investors to create very healthy environments and sustainable buildings. Ron was mentioning that in the Netherlands our regulation is already quite tight. Although it's quite tight, we saved 48% of CO2 emission on the building. 48% on a building in an environment where we already have a tight regulation. So I think that indicates that the installations and the design of the project really made a big difference. And a lot of technologies and overseas, as Ron was saying, he was doing it 20 years ago, were there already. And if you look to the innovations, also within the building, they are there. no doubt about it. 21 innovation credits were delivered. But if you look into it, a lot of those things we knew yesterday, and we know tomorrow, and I think we start using this much more often to create much more buildings and to beat these kind of buildings, let's say, every day. So in 20 years, we have much more sustainable buildings, because it really can be done. The energy efficiency is, of course, also about consuming green, there is nothing wrong with consuming energy. There is something wrong with how you produce the energy and how you get there. So on-site production, renewable energies are a critical part to leverage on. Something about the background for maybe a bit more technical guys used to work with building management systems. Let's be fair. Sustainable buildings do have a lot of technology. So sustainable buildings are, for technology companies, are interesting buildings because there is a lot of business, you could say. Because you need, if you want to provide all this data and you want to reuse this data, you need technology to gather it, to use it, to analyze it, and to start benefits from it. And there's nothing wrong with it as long as it contributes. If you look to this system, we have a backbone, what I told, on IPv6, and we used 50 automation servers. Maybe not telling everyone what it is. Basically, it's a building management computer. On one such computer, you can run a building like 2,000, 3,000 square meters. So we have quite a heavily dense installation with intelligent components which can interact on floor level. So on each floor level, we have 3 of those devices, and they are gathering the data from the zone controllers, provide the climate ceiling installations, the lighting systems, the energy management systems, the heat meters. So we provide a lot of data points, something like 20,000 physical IOs combined with literally thousands, 10,000 virtual data coming from the lighting bulbs, the energy valves, put into place in the building. So we have approximately something like 100,000 hardware or software related I/O points, which we bring into the building management systems, and we use to analyze the system to start optimizing the system behind it. So yeah, all those data became a very big impact. And now what are you going to do with those data? I always say it's not a problem getting those data, it's a problem what you start doing with all those data. Because data gathering is nice, but if you don't do anything with it in the end, it doesn't make sense. So if you don't think about it, what you will do with it in the end, how on earth you're going to design a system to gather all this data if you can't make chocolate out of it in the end? So you have to overthink in the design process, how do I build up my data gathering system to provide useful data in the end? And I think that's something which is very often forgotten in the beginning. We start plumping in all kinds of systems, and in the end we say, okay, we have a lot of data, what can we make of it? And then we see that we miss vital parts of it. So apps in this case, and MapIQ, which is mentioned there, is not a Schneider Electric thing. It was basically an IT startup from some students who had a great idea how to gather all those data from connected lighting, from the BMS, from all those systems, bring it together in an app for Deloitte. And I have to a bit speed up, I see on time. So it's also providing, just one thing about it, the lights itself know where you are, or can know where you are. So it can help you to bring you to your meeting room. So indoor navigation can be done by BMSs and is here been done by the app. So if you have a meeting on the second floor in a meeting room where you never have been before, your app can tell you, you take the elevator, you go to the 6th floor, you walk to the left, and your third door at your right side, that's where your meeting is. I think that's a very useful application for building tenants. So in partnerships, same as in Czech Republic, we only work with partners. Partners make our business. So HE Group in this case, my system integrators, played a vital role in it, in creating the system. We designed it, we had a great idea, but they had to do it. Together with Blink Systems, which is the company who built the MapIQ app for Deloitte, they played a key role in making good analyzing data out of all those gathered data out of those various systems. And I think I will skip those because, so I would say let's convert watts into negawatts. And for those who don't know, a negawatt is a watt you didn't use. So it's not about megawatts, it's about negawatts. And if we start thinking about negawatts, then it pushes us in the right direction. Okay.
Thank you, Erik. A few weeks ago, I was at a conference of EcoBuilding, which is the Saint-Gobain division, and there, one architect spoke about the storage devices. It produces lots of heat. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, it's starting to be used as a heating system as well. Is that also counted in your system? The heating that is produced by the storage, because you need the data have to be stored somewhere. Is it inside a building, or do you use cloud? Or
you mean in a data center, right?
Yes, the data center and the storage systems, the big boxes that looks like.
Within the building, there is no critical data center. Of course, there are computers, no doubt, but there are not critical. The vital critical data from Deloitte are in a data center outside. So. Basically, the servers which are in the building, they can malfunction without interacting with their critical processes. So thereby, it's a very limited data center, and of course we use very energy efficient ways of cooling down the system, which is in-row cooling. So you bring the cooling directly where you need it. Let's to keep it short.
And maybe a question for Ron. How is it to discuss the deal with as an architect and the investor? Always the architect has a huge views and ideas, and the investor has a low budget. So how it goes together?
Yeah, it's the critical question. How does it all get together, and how is it paid for? You start a project with a budget, and nobody really knows what every line means that you draw. But there's an understanding. Netherlands is total consensus society. We had a chat about this a little bit earlier. People are used to working together. People are used to making projects together. I think that's one of the reasons this was so successful in Amsterdam in this date. There is no such thing as value engineering in Holland. It doesn't exist. It happens all the time. Basically, it's part of our nature. But what I find interesting is how people decide to spend money on the right things. And it's interesting to look at Chris's slide that says 90% of the operating cost of a building is the people. And that is only the cost that these people the amount of money these people cost. But if you imagine what it means to Deloitte to attract talent into their building, that is not even part of that equation. That is 2, 3, 4 times as expensive and as valuable for a company like Deloitte than is their running cost of a building. So if you create a building that's really appealing, people love to come there. They want and the Dutch, I think, are probably in their culture a little bit further in the understanding of sustainability as a good thing, something that they want to be part of. I'm not a sociologist, but I would like to figure out whether that's actually true. But the feeling I have is that people actually really like to be part of this, and they all use their phone to figure out what happens in the building. It attracts people. And it's the one BREEAM point. Maybe we should add that to the 98.34%. But there's no BREEAM point for architectural beauty, And it's kind of weird, because if you make really good buildings that people like, people love, they'll look after them better, they'll last the test of time. This building has been sitting up for God knows how many years. It'll be here in another 100 years. I can promise you the functions will change. It doesn't matter. People will paint it a bit. It will stand. And if you create beautiful buildings, they will last the test of time. That should be 5%, I reckon.
How long do you think it will take to persuade, let's say, most of the investors that it's worth, or like they should be willing, spending more money on a sustainable building, let's say?
Yeah.
What's the future?
Well, my worry was always that the costs were piling up, and in fact, I try not to worry about that too much. It stops me doing my job. But the client decided to do this building, decided to spend the money in 2010, which was just after the country had recovered a little bit from the recession in 2008 and 2009. The investment climate was really bad. The German funds who tend to buy office buildings in the Netherlands were not buying at all. Were not even coming to Holland to talk to people. It was really that bad. So they hang in there. They waited, and the building eventually was sold only beginning of last year, when it was financed and almost completed its construction. And I think it was the total package that was so appealing to the investor. It was. Honestly, they walked in, and my client told me it was the best moment of his career, because that's the moment that he makes his money, right? The developers don't see a penny until the building is sold. I walked in with the investors, and they looked up in the atrium and said, "Wow, this is like a dream come true. It's wonderful."
Thank you. Tohle je také prostor pro vás. Samozřejmě, pokud máte dotazy, hlašte se. Máme dotazy, perfektní, jdeme na ně. Dostanete mikrofon, abychom to dobře slyšeli a aby to mohly tlumočnice také přeložit. Můžete se ptát v češtině, v angličtině, jak je vám libo.
Hello, my name is Jiří Kubias, and I was wondering what is the user's experience with the individual thermal comfort in that building, because the heating and cooling ceilings are normally considered a slow response system. So I was wondering how the individual control is perceived and how it works.
You say that it is a slow process, which is true, but it's also the most stable process to create a healthy climate, or a healthy or a stable climate. So it's been. I'm not aware of any complaints about the climate, and the user interaction with the app. They find it fantastic, as Ron was mentioning. It's presetting their personal behavior, so it's a bit tailored. If they used to work at 400 lux of luminary and they push it into the system and they start working and the lights adapt, that really gives them a good user experience. So I think they love it, like Ron was saying, and I heard the same rumors that people not wanted to work at Deloitte, but they want to start working in the edge, and I think that's part of for giving the answer. So it's an image in itself.
Thank you. Další otázky? Tady jsem viděla ruku vepředu. Tady máme hnedka 2 dotazy, tak to postupně zvládneme.
Hi, my name is Andrei. I work for Knauf Insulation, and thanks for the presentations. It was quite amazing how much data you can collect. But it also struck me that most of the data relates to energy, which is clear because it's hard data. It's there, it's clear. But then relating back to the chart that we've seen in the previous presentation, that's the 1% of the cost. So we have amazing data about 1% of the cost. And I was wondering, can you also collect some data on that 90%, on the kind of softer issues, happiness, health of the people, productivity? Is there any way how you can collect some data on that and provide some evidence to those claims that we all share that, it's better for the productivity? Yes, but by how much? Thanks.
Very, very good question. The people are not fit out with sensors. This data you have to extract it in a different way, and that's a bit of a journey. Deloitte is looking with this analytic software how they can merge the data from, yes, you're right, energy, lighting consumption, access control, working hours, because if people are longer in the building, that should give them some information, how they can merge and how they can make that something telling about those 90%. Because you're right, that's where the biggest investments have been on, and that's the thing where we try to make chocolate out of all those data, which is maybe not my business case, but the interoperability between systems, because it's not one big system hosting all the data. It's a multi-database community, you could say, where new smart WizKids from Deloitte will start finding ways in how to merge those data and to tell something about the behavior linked with what Chris Pottage was telling about the behavior and of the building and the people within it. So yes, it's not there, but I'm sure it will be there faster as I can imagine today. Because I've seen at the grand opening just 2 weeks ago, they had already the first 2 slides with combined information. And they, wow, did it get out of my system or out of the building, out of the computer with a roof? So I'm sure within 1 year and a half, we will be surprised what they will do with the data gathered in the building.
Maybe I can add something to this. Deloitte also have a group of people who do data analytics, and they are starting to understand how they can use the data partly produced by the system, but also partly produced by talking to people and people's responses. And they are collecting the data, trying to analyze it in a way that I can't even imagine, but that will help them with putting together the most efficient work groups of people. So they are working out, this is a group that's led by a tax consultant, interesting, and some of the team members, one woman is a social psychologist, she runs the studies mostly. There's even an astrologer part of this, I don't know, haven't figured out what he's doing there, but he's a young kid from university who has an interest in data analytics. And they're trying to work out what it means in terms of HR. So how, it's not just the physical conditions that people work in, but it's how they work together. There is a very acute understanding from the companies that are most successful in the world at the moment, in the last 10 years, is that it's probably something to do with the fact they talk to each other. Which is a new thing, and we all have to get used to it. You don't sit at your desk and work, you have to talk to each other, and it's an amazing thing. And we're finding that whereas 10 years ago we thought people would work more from home, and we wouldn't need our office building so much anymore. It's not true. People like to come to work. It's a social thing. It's a big part of their life. And if people work in a place they enjoy, they come to work. And the question that I often get asked is, what do these people all think of being monitored all day? You know, the system would know that I would be sitting right here talking. They would probably tape what I say. They know how warm it is where I am, what the lighting levels are, what do I feel about this. And a good example is that the unions had questioned the use of number plate registration or recognition that opens the arm barrier of the car park. They said, you know, this is privacy. People, you can't check on people when they arrive at work in the morning or how fast they drive or all those things. And Deloitte said, fine, we'll ask the people. And they asked everybody in the building, and they found that more than 99% of the people found it totally fine that the building knew exactly where they were at any time. And it's a new thing. You have to walk around the building and see the people there. They love it. It's the first building, my client told me, that they have delivered where they don't have just nightmares the first 3 months because stuff doesn't work, people don't like it, it's too cold, it's too warm. There's such excitement about the building and about being there that they haven't had any of this. And for a Rotterdam developer, the client, OVG, are actually moving into the building. They said, you know, it's the best building we've ever done. We love being here. There's half a floor left on the 13th floor. They're moving in. They're moving their whole operation from Rotterdam to Amsterdam to be in this building.
Thank you. A poslední otázka, tady vepředu. Měli bychom i další dotazy, ale jsme už poměrně na tom špatně s časem, tak zkusíme to zvládnout stručně.
Okay. So hi, my name is Vitmerka. Do you want to repeat this complex system in somewhere else in the planet, because you spend lots of money and energy on it? So do you have any plans to repeat this concept, big data, Internet things, something like that somewhere else?
In reality, I think it will be the new standard. In reality, I think it will become the new standard, because this reuse of data where Ron was touching on, and the acceptance of people is in that it's bring new functionality. It's not that they are feeling controlled, that they know they are entering the building. No, the functionality is I drive in it, and the barrier is opening without putting my card outside my desk. The fact that they are knowing where I am in the building helps me to find the colleague which I was searching for and avoid that I'm walking around. So I think it's a complex system, yes, but I think it will become the new standard in the end.
Děkuju. Další dotaz.
Okay, you had already mentioned a bit that you had some extra time to, let's say, develop this building. Could you tell us how long Deloitte was involved in the development of the building, and how long could you imagine in the regular time it would take to develop such a complicated building? Thank you.
Yeah, the reason I think what costs most of the time is not so much designing the system or designing the building, but for Deloitte to work out what they wanted to do, their own brief, if you like. And this is something that they started when they did their building in Rotterdam, which was completed in 2007, I think, 2008. As I said, we went through a recession. The original design is from 2007, and we didn't work on the project for a couple of years because there was no way to finance it. We did some studies. Can we face the building? Can the local university rent half of it? Those kind of considerations. But in fact, there was time for the management of Deloitte. At the time, they were thinking of how their business would transition to a digital world, which this is very much part of on their behalf. They had time to do this. In terms of energy, BREEAM NL, the Dutch version of BREEAM, was not in place when we started designing the building. It came to Holland in, I can't remember, about 4 years ago. So most of the measures of sustainability were planned even during construction. So the building wasn't all designed and finished and given to the contractor to build. Actually, the contractor became very, very involved in the process of making the building more sustainable. And I found that very, very promising because they play such a huge part in it. You know, they are responsible for many of the BREEAM credits, of course. You know, every truck that drives into the building site, the truck driver has to write down where he came from, how long it took, how long he was in a traffic jam, how much petrol he used. All those things are part of the BREEAM rating. So it is getting the group of people together that probably takes most of the time in organization. But I think in this case it was mostly deciding what they wanted to do. So the orientation story and the atrium and the architecture was pretty much established 5-6 years ago, but the process didn't stop there. It kept going.
Erik, I think I chose this one. Thank you very much. I have to say you'll still have a chance to hear more from Ron's experience because he'll be holding a special workshop in the afternoon after 4 p.m. So who is signing will have a chance to hear more. Guys, thank you very much for your experience. And now we can move to another part of our discussion.